People think an affair starts with a stolen kiss in a dark parking lot. Mine started with a text. "Hey, can we pick up where we left off?" From an unknown number on his screen. His excuse was weak. "It's just stress at work. We joke around." They thought I would cry. They thought I would be quiet. They didn't know that was the night I started taking notes. They didn't know I'd let them hand me the knife and then stand back to watch me use it. My name is Avery Bennett, and I live in a house in Riverton, Illinois, where the silence has teeth. It was late, past 11, maybe closer to midnight. The kind of late where the suburbs are so quiet, you can hear the ice maker drop its payload 2 floors down. I was carrying a mug of chamomile tea up the stairs, the steam fogging my glasses. The carpet muffled my steps. I'd been a content lead at VarioQuest Analytics long enough to know that most of the world runs on insomnia and deadlines, but tonight was supposed to be quiet. Lucas was home early, for once. I pushed open our bedroom door. The room was dark except for the lamp on my side table, which I'd left on, and the sharp, blue-white glow of a phone screen on his. Lucas was in the bathroom, the shower running. His phone was on the nightstand. Face up, a new message had just lit it up. It wasn't the "hey you up" text from a stranger that I'd braced myself for during the last 6 months of late nights and unexplained receipts. This was worse. It was from someone saved in his contacts. Tessa C. Strategy. The message read, "Still thinking about earlier. Stress is killing me." I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp or drop the mug. The tea was warm in my hands, a solid, grounding presence. The water from the shower was a steady hiss, a metronome counting down to a moment I hadn't realized was already here. My mind, the one that organizes marketing campaigns and analyzes engagement metrics, just shifted. It became very clear, very cold. I set the mug down on the dresser, the ceramic making a soft click on the wood. I pulled my own phone from the pocket of my robe. The screen lit up my face. I held it over his, careful not to let my shadow fall on the screen. The kissy face emoji at the end of Tessa's text seemed to pulse. I took the picture. The sound of the shutter click was non-existent, but in my head, it was as loud as a gunshot. The image instantly saved, backed up, and settled into the cloud. The water in the bathroom shut off. The sudden silence was heavy. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, just as the bathroom door opened, releasing a cloud of steam that smelled like his expensive sandalwood body wash. Lucas Grayson stood there, a towel slung low on his hips, rubbing another towel over his dark hair. He was the picture of the successful strategy consultant he sold himself as at Vectorize Solutions. Charming, sharp, and, I now knew, a liar. "Hey," he said, smiling. "Thought you'd be asleep." "Just bringing up some tea," I said. My voice was even. I even managed a small smile. I gestured with my chin toward his phone, which had just gone dark. "You're popular tonight. Work emergency." I kept it light, half joking, half curious, the way a wife is supposed to ask. Lucas glanced at the phone, then back at me, his smile tightening just a fraction at the corners. He walked over, picked it up, and tossed it onto the bed. "God, no. It's just Tessa from Strategy." He said her name easily, too easily. "You know how it is," he continued, walking to his closet. "We're getting slammed trying to hit end-of-quarter quotas. Everyone's losing their minds. We just send stupid texts to blow off steam. You shouldn't read into it. Gaslight, engage, the classic maneuver, minimize the evidence, invalidate the observer. A kissy face emoji seems a little more than blowing off steam." "Lucas," I said, picking up my mug. He laughed. It was a practice sound, the one he used on clients just before he upsold them. "Babe, come on. It's stress at work. We all joke around like that. It's the culture. You wouldn't get it." He pulled on a pair of pajama pants. "Seriously, if you're going to start trusting some random text over me, your husband, maybe we should sign some things right now to get everything clear." There it was, the seed, the little threat disguised as a joke. He'd said it before, in different ways. "If you don't like how hard I work, maybe we should rethink this. If you can't handle the pressure, maybe this isn't for you. This time, the signing things part landed differently. It wasn't a threat to me anymore. It was an idea. I'm not reading into anything, I said, taking a sip of tea. It was lukewarm now. I'm just tired. He came over, kissed my forehead. His skin was damp. That's my girl. You don't understand my industry. Avery, it's a Shark Tank. Let me handle it. The condescension was familiar. It was a heavy blanket he'd been slowly suffocating me with for years. I just smiled and nodded. Okay, good night. He went downstairs to get a glass of water. He said, I sat on the edge of the bed, my back to his phone. I heard him move around downstairs. Then I heard the distinct, tinny sound of a voice message playing from his phone's speaker. His volume clearly turned up. It was his best friend, Derek Shaw. Bro, Derek's voice boomed, echoing slightly in the quiet house. She'll cry if you dump her. All these housewives are the same. I didn't move. I heard Lucas chuckle, a low sound. Before the message ended, he was in the living room, directly below our bedroom. I stood up, walked to the top of the stairs, and stood in the shadows of the hallway. My pulse was a trapped bird against my ribs, but my face was calm. My hands were steady. This wasn't the first time I'd heard that tone from them, that casual dismissal. Women are predictable. Just keep them happy. They don't know the real world. I went back into the bedroom and shut the door, clicking the lock softly. I pulled out my phone. I opened the screenshot. Still thinking about earlier, stress is killing me. I stared at it, the words, the sender, the casual, destructive intimacy. I went to the file options, select, rename, my fingers typed, stress at work receipt 01.png. The 01 was a promise. There would be more. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen. The woman looking back was not the one who had walked up the stairs 10 minutes ago. All right, I whispered to her. Stress at work. Then let's work. I got into bed. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. They thought I would break. They thought I would be the predictable housewife. But how did I, the woman who used to laugh nervously at his dismissive jokes, the woman who shrunk herself to fit into his world, stay so calm? Because this wasn't the beginning. This was just the first time I decided to start keeping score. It didn't start with the text from Tessa. That was just the first receipt. The behavior, the slow erosion, that started years ago. Rewind 2, maybe 3 years. Lucas Grayson was at his peak. He was the quintessential city man. Even after we moved to Riverton, he sold high-level strategy solutions, which meant he knew how to talk. He could charm a room, command a dinner table, and make everyone feel like they were in on the joke. The problem was, I was usually the punchline. If Avery hadn't married me, he'd say at a barbecue, slinging an arm around my shoulder, she'd still be in Columbus, living with 10 cats. Our friends would laugh. Lucas had that effect, and I laughed too, a tight, practiced smile. But every time I laughed, a small piece of me chipped away. I was shrinking, and he was the one whittling me down. It was never one big thing. It was 1,000 paper cuts, so small you'd feel crazy for saying they hurt. I stopped wearing my favorite blue silk dress after he glanced at it and said, "A little try-hard for a client mixer. Don't you think?" I stopped recording my personal podcast on marketing trends. I'd been building a decent following, but one night he tossed his keys in the bowl and said, "Some of my biggest clients follow you. Babe, maybe talk a little less. It's not the most professional look." Lucas never raised his voice. He never hit me. He was too smart for that. His weapons were shame and condescension, delivered with a smile. He'd wait until we were in the car or in the kitchen, just us, and he'd drop a line. "Don't embarrass me in front of my team tonight. Okay, they're killers. Try not to look so unprofessional. I'm carrying this house right now, and I need you to at least look the part. I'm from Ohio. I was raised to be polite, to be supportive, to make it work." So I did. I made it work. I became the perfect backdrop for his ambitions. My best friend, Maya Ortiz. Saw it. We'd met in college, and she'd since become a shark of a family lawyer in Chicago. She was the one person Lucas couldn't charm. She flew in for an awards night. VarioQuest was throwing one where I was actually getting a promotion. We were at the cocktail hour, and Lucas, holding 2 glasses of champagne, handed one to me and said, right in front of Maya, "Avery spends money like she's vlogging. Good thing she's got me." He walked away to network. Maya just watched him go, her expression unreadable. "He's just joking," I said, the familiar excuse feeling like ash in my mouth. That's his way." Maya turned to me, her eyes sharp. "Avery, you don't have to mean it to cause an injury." She took a sip of her club soda. "A paper cut doesn't look like much, but 1,000 of them will make you bleed out." I brushed it off. I had to. Admitting she was right meant admitting my marriage was a failure. My life began to orbit his, my schedule, my social energy, my entire emotional bandwidth was calibrated to the rhythm of Lucas's meetings, Lucas's moods, Lucas's deadlines. I stopped calling my sister, Riley, in Denver, as often. The weekly calls became monthly, then just texts on holidays. It was easier than explaining why I sounded so tired, why I couldn't just stand up for myself. "How do you explain that your husband is killing you with kindness, and through it all?" I had one single, pathetic comfort. I'd read the articles. I'd heard the stories from friends. I'd tell myself, "It's fine. He's stressed. He's ambitious. But at least he's not cheating." That was the line. The one thing that would be too much. And in my mind, as long as he wasn't doing that, everything else was manageable. I was a fool. I'd set the bar on the floor, and he was still finding ways to trip over it. The real shift, the moment the seed he'd planted tonight really took root, happened about a year ago. It was his company's annual gala, black tie, an absurdly expensive hotel ballroom downtown. Lucas was on a high. He'd landed a massive account. He'd had just enough bourbon to be arrogant instead of charming. I was standing next to him, smiling until my face ached. As he accepted congratulations, a partner from his firm clapped him on the back and gestured to me. "You've got a patient one here. Grayson." Lucas leaned in close, his voice a hot whisper in my ear, the smell of bourbon and self-satisfaction washing over me. "You're just like those wives in the finance department. Just clinging." It wasn't a joke. It wasn't for an audience. It was just for me. I felt the blood drain from my face. I nodded, walked to the ladies' room, and locked myself in a stall. I didn't cry. I just stood there, breathing, clinging. To what? To the man who told me my podcast was unprofessional. To the man who made me feel small so he could feel big. That night, when we got home to Riverton, he was still wired, triumphant. I went to the kitchen to get him a glass of water, my hands moving on autopilot, clinging. He was the one who always made the jokes. "If you're not happy, just leave. Maybe we should sign something so you don't take me for everything." Always joking, always reminding me who held the power. I brought him the water. He was unbuttoning his shirt in the living room. "You know," I said, my voice surprisingly light, "you're always so worried about what would happen if we split. All those jokes." He laughed. "Just being smart, babe. You're a catch. A very expensive catch." "Well," I said, sitting on the ottoman, "why don't you sign a financial agreement? Just a simple one. It would put your mind at ease. Then you can stop joking about it." I was joking, too. See, I could play the game. Lucas looked at me, a slow grin spreading across his face. He was still a little drunk and very, very arrogant. "You serious? You want to do that now?" "Why not?" I said with a shrug. I actually downloaded one of those personal asset declaration templates online a while back, just as a joke, to see what it looked like. I'd downloaded it 6 months prior, after he'd made a particularly cutting remark about my Ohio upbringing in front of his parents. "Go get it," he said, amused. "Let's do it. Let's be professional." I went to my office. I printed out the 2-page document. It was simple, barely legal but still a template. It basically said that in the event of a dissolution, premarital assets would be respected and marital assets. It was vague, but it had lines for signatures. I brought it to him with a pen. He didn't even read it. He just scrawled Lucas Grayson on the bottom of both pages, his signature an arrogant slash of ink. "There," he said, handing the pen back. "All signed. Now you can't take my watch." He winked, tapped my cheek, and headed upstairs. I stood there in the quiet living room, the 2 pages warm in my hand. I signed my name. The next morning, he'd forgotten all about it. He was hungover and grumpy, complaining about the gala's bad music. I didn't forget. I folded the document, put it in a waterproof envelope, and tucked it into the back of my filing cabinet, behind my old college transcripts. It wasn't a plan, not yet. It was just insurance. It was the first time I'd taken one of his paper cuts and used it to draw a line of my own. The day after I renamed the screenshot, I called in sick to VarioQuest. I told my boss I had a migraine, a lie that was almost true. The pressure behind my eyes was real, but it wasn't from an aura. It was from clarity. I drove the 50 miles into Chicago. The original document, the one he'd signed with a drunken flourish in a manila envelope on the passenger seat. Maya Ortiz's office wasn't in one of the gleaming glass tower law firms. She worked in a pre-war building with a temperamental elevator and a lobby that smelled like polish. Her space was small, cluttered with case files and weak coffee, but her name on the door was sharp and clear. I sat across from her desk under the hum of a tired neon light that flickered just outside her window. The light cast a pale, sickly glow on the stacks of paper. "So," she said, leaning back in her chair. She hadn't looked at the document yet. I'd just placed it on her desk. "You look awful, Avery, but you also look finished." "He's cheating on me." "Maya," I said. My voice was flat. She nodded. No sympathy, just a professional intake of information. "Okay. With who?" "A coworker, Tessa C. From Strategy. I have a screenshot of a text. I can get more." "And the document," she tapped the envelope. "He signed it about a year ago. He was drunk at the gala. I baited him. He's always joking about me taking his money, so I joked back and told him to sign a simple asset agreement I downloaded, and he did. He didn't even read it." Maya pulled the 2 pages out. Her expression didn't change as she read the generic template. She was silent for a full minute. Then she looked up at me, the neon light catching in her dark eyes. Was he lucid? He was arrogant. He'd had bourbon, but he wasn't falling down drunk. He knew what he was signing. He just didn't care. "Were you holding a weapon?" "I was holding a pen, Maya. Not under duress." "Then he was just an idiot." She tapped the signature. "This is a weak agreement, Avery. A template from the internet isn't going to hold up on its own, but his signature, this signature, given under these circumstances, this is something else." She leaned forward. "He handed you the knife, Aves, a dull, flimsy, plastic knife, but it's a knife. Our job is to sharpen it, and your job is to pick the exact moment to turn it." My heart, which had been a cold stone in my chest, finally beat. "He threatened to sign things last night," I said. "After I caught him, he'll file first. He'll try to control it." "Of course he will," Maya said. "Men like Lucas don't just leave a marriage. They launch a campaign. He'll try to paint you as unstable, emotional, greedy. He and Derek Shaw, that parasite, will try to make this their victory lap." She took a legal pad and a pen. "So we prepare for that. We don't use this yet." She held up the signed paper. "This is our ace. What we do now is draft a supplement, a clarification, and we get him to sign that too. He won't sign anything else. Not now. He will if he doesn't know what it is," Maya said. "He's about to be stressed at work, right? He's going to be managing his affair, his quotas, and his idiot friend. He's going to be watching you for tears, not for paperwork. We're going to draft a supplemental agreement. It'll be a marital asset clarification. just tidying up the loose ends from the first joke. It will protect the Riverton house as your primary residence. It will stipulate a proportional division of assets, not just a 50-50 split. What does proportional mean? It means, Maya said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading on her face, that if one party is found to have engaged in behavior that financially or emotionally destabilizes the marriage, say, by spending marital funds on hotels for a Tessa C from Strategy, the division of assets adjusts in your favor. And most importantly, it will include a clause that reconfirms his voluntary signature on the original document from 1 year ago. He'll sign it. Avery. He'll sign it because he's too arrogant to read the fine print. I left her office 2 hours later. She kept the original document in her office safe. I had a task list. First, I went to a print shop downtown. I scanned the original document. I scanned my driver's license. I scanned our marriage certificate. Second, I followed Maya's instructions and created a new email account. Not with Google, not with a name she could guess. It was something obscure, encrypted, and linked to nothing. Third, I emailed the scans to that address. When I got back home to Riverton, the house was empty. Lucas was at team drinks. I went to my office and opened a new text document. I looked at the clock. It was 1:05 a.m. I typed pattern 2025, 0918, late 1:05 a.m. Inside the file, I wrote, came home late, smelled of sandalwood and a floral perfume, not mine, claimed team drinks to blow off steam, kissed my forehead, said, you don't get the industry. Avoided eye contact. I saved it. I didn't feel rage. I felt organized. I wasn't planning a revenge. I was building a parachute. That weekend, I became the wife he'd always wanted, the one who'd been fading, the one who'd been sensitive. I was back. I made his favorite meal, the osso buco that takes 6 hours. I chilled his favorite Pilsner. I sat and listened, and he talked. He was so relieved I wasn't reading into things that he became careless. He relaxed. He started talking about work, really talking. This new girl in Strategy, Tessa, he said one night over dinner, swirling his wine. She's smart as a whip, really gets the killer instinct. It's refreshing. That's great, honey, I said, refilling his glass. It's so good when you have a strong team. He beamed. His unprofessional wife was finally understanding. He started leaving his phone on the nightstand, face down, but not locked. He thought I was tamed. He thought I'd heard Derek's voicemail and just accepted it. He thought I was the predictable housewife. He was wrong. While he was in the shower, I wasn't looking at his texts. That was too risky, too small. I went to the shared laptop in the study, the one we used for taxes and booking flights. I created a new user profile, one hidden from the main login screen. With a password, he would never guess Columbus Cats 10. Then I logged into his profile. He hadn't changed the password since we'd bought it. I turned on the iCloud sync for iMessage. I turned on the Google Photos automatic backup. I linked them all to a new, dummy account I controlled. I set up a rule in my secret email inbox. Any and all data, all backups, all photographs, all message logs were to be forwarded, copied, and filed. I was building a case, not just for Maya, but for myself. I was creating a perfect, unassailable record of his betrayal, all using the technology he paid for and ignored. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his shadow. The late summer barbecue was Lucas's idea. It was always his idea to fill our Riverton backyard with the smell of smoke, overpriced craft beer, and the sound of his own voice. He loved to hold court. Derek Shaw was there, naturally. Derek was Lucas's shadow from college, now a sales guy at some other tech firm, with the same slicked-back hair and predatory smile. They were a two-man fan club for each other. I was in the kitchen, sliding cut fruit onto a platter. The sliding glass door was open, and their voices carried easily over the sizzle of the grill. I heard my name. I paused, my hand hovering over a bowl of strawberries. Seriously, man, Derek said. I could picture him leaning against the grill, a bottle of beer in his hand. If you ever actually dump her, you have to call me. I want a front row seat. I want to see her face when she realizes the gravy train is over. I picked up a strawberry, placed it on the platter. Lucas laughed. It was that low, appreciative chuckle he reserved for Derek's particular brand of cruelty. Come on, man. It's not like that. But yeah. He lowered his voice, but not enough. Avery thinks we don't know the law. She's a good girl, but she's all emotion. She wouldn't know where to even start. All emotion. I found another perfect strawberry, sliced the top off, and placed it in a precise, concentric circle. My hands weren't shaking. My breathing was even. I was a content lead. I built narratives. I understood strategy. They saw a housewife. They saw all emotion. Good. Let them... I don't know, Lucas continued. She's just been... sensitive. You know, clingy? That's when you cut the cord. Bro, Derek said. So, what's the new plan? That girl from your strategy team. I stopped. My blood felt like it had turned to ice water. Ah, Tessa, Lucas said. And there was a shift in his tone, a warmth. She's a killer. She's the one who's been helping me carry the team. Smart, driven. We've been talking, just venting late at night? Venting, Derek repeated, the word loaded with suggestion. Yeah, man, just relieving stress, Lucas said. There was a beat, and then Derek Shaw let out a huge, barking laugh. It was a sound that scraped my nerves raw. Relieving stress. That's perfect. Sorry, babe. I wasn't cheating. I was just relieving some stress at work. Shut up, man, Lucas said, laughing with him. Stress at work, Derek howled. That's what you tell her if she ever finds a text. It's brilliant. She'll buy it. The words hit me like a physical blow. The title of my first screenshot. Their alibi. Their joke. I picked up the heavy platter of fruit. I walked out the sliding door. A perfect, pleasant smile fixed on my face. Who wants dessert? I asked, my voice bright and even. Lucas and Derek turned, their laughter dying. They just looked at me. Avery, babe, Lucas said, taking the platter. You're the best. He kissed my temple. See? Derek gravy train. He meant it as a joke. I just smiled. After that night, the pattern I was tracking accelerated. The stress at work became all-consuming. Lucas started coming home later, not just past midnight, past 1, past 2 in the morning. He smelled different. The familiar, subtle sandalwood he'd always worn was now layered with something sharp and new. A cologne I hadn't bought him. He was dressing better for late-night work sessions than he did for our anniversary. And then there was the cash. I handled our joint finances. It was one of the housewife duties he'd gladly pass to me. I noticed the withdrawals, not large, structured amounts, small, bleeding ones, $200 here, $300 there, always from an ATM downtown, never the one in our local Riverton grocery store. He wasn't just cheating, he was paying for it. I didn't ask, I didn't cry, I didn't confront, I just documented. Pattern 202510. 02 late 2:17 a.m. Text, home at 2:17 a.m. New cologne. Obvious. Claimed a server migration went bad. Shirt was perfectly pressed. Pattern 2025-10, 05 cash 300. Text, $300 cash withdrawal from downtown ATM. 9:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Work dinner was client paid. The wall of their arrogance was so high. They couldn't see me on the other side. Taking measurements. The real test came a few weeks later. A Sunday dinner at his parents' house in Mapleford, a table set with his mother's best china, pot roast and polite questions about my job at VarioQuest. Lucas was expansive, confident, holding a glass of red wine. His father had been asking about their portfolio. You're a lucky man, Lucas, his mother said, smiling at me. Avery keeps this whole family on track. Lucas laughed and took a long sip of wine. Oh, I know. She's the best. But let's be honest. He winked at his father. If Avery and I ever split, she'd crawl back in a week. She still doesn't know how to install a new modem. His mother's smile faltered, becoming a tight, awkward grimace. His father just grunted. I was sitting across from him. I didn't flinch. I just picked up the wine bottle. "More, Mrs. Grayson?" I asked, my hand perfectly steady as I poured. "Lucas, honey." I smiled at him. Inside, a cold, hard little box was checked. Precedent established in front of family. Noted. That night, after we drove home in near total silence, Lucas went to sleep, snoring lightly from the wine. I went to our shared study. I opened the settings on his phone, which he'd left charging on the desk. He'd never bothered to set up a passcode. Women are predictable, all emotion. I navigated to the audio settings. I found the call recording app I'd installed weeks ago, buried in a folder named Utilities. I enabled it, setting it to automatically record all calls to and from one specific number, Derek Shaw. I looked at the file directory. It was empty, but it wouldn't be for long. I went back to my own laptop. I created a new folder in my secure drive. I created a placeholder file, just waiting for the audio. I named it Derek Bet She Will Cry. My phone lit up with a text. It was Maya. "Keep going. Just data. No emotion. And remember the rule. Avery, you don't touch kids. You don't use them. You don't mess with them. Don't give them a single reason to paint you as unstable. Stick to the facts. Stick to the money." I texted back a single letter K. I turned off my laptop. The house was quiet. I wasn't a wife. I was an architect. And I was just laying the foundation. It was a Saturday in late October. The air was crisp, and the leaves in Riverton had turned that perfect shade of burnt orange. Lucas announced he was going to the gym for a serious session. "I'm leaving my phone," he said, tossing it onto the kitchen counter. "I don't want any distractions. Just going to hit the weights and clear my head." It was a performance of virtue. See, I'm not attached to my phone. I'm focusing on myself. He thought it made him look innocent. It only made him look stupid. He kissed my cheek. He still smelled faintly of the new, sharp cologne. "Don't wait up." "I won't," I said, smiling. "Have a good workout." I waited until the sound of his car pulling out of the driveway had completely faded. I counted another 60 seconds, just to be sure. Then I went to the kitchen, picked up his phone still unlocked, of course, and walked into the study. I sat down at the shared laptop, the one I had already prepared. I plugged his phone in with the charging cable. A small icon popped up on the laptop screen. "Trust this computer," on his phone. A notification appeared. I tapped "Trust." The sync began immediately. I didn't have to dig. I didn't have to hack. I just had to wait. The iMessage app on the laptop, linked to the dummy account, began to populate. Thread after thread. Loading, syncing, downloading, and there it was. Tessa C. Strategy. It wasn't just one text. It was a river, months of it. I clicked. My hands were steady. My breathing was low and even. I was just a content lead analyzing data. There were the memes, dozens of them. Inside jokes about their bosses that were just a thin cover for "I'm thinking about you." There were the complaints. Tessa. Does she suspect anything Lucas know? She's just being sensitive lately. Typical. Lucas, I swear. I had to listen to her talk about her VarioQuest project for 20 minutes. Had to bite my tongue. Tessa. My hero. They were sloppy. They were so confident in my emotional state that they hadn't bothered to be smart. And then I found it. The logistics. A company-wide offsite in 2 weeks. A sales conference in Scottsdale. Lucas booked. They put me at the main resort. King bed. Such a waste. Tessa. Not if I sneak over from the Overflow Hotel, Lucas. That's the plan. I'll expense the room service. Tessa. You're bad. Lucas, you have no idea. I selected the entire conversation. From the first hey to the plan for the offsite. I exported the thread. I emailed the file to my secret, encrypted address. The subject line was just a random string of numbers. I sent it. Then, I went into the laptop's iMessage cache. I deleted the thread. I deleted the export file. I emptied the trash. I went into the system logs and cleared the activity for the last 10 minutes. I unplugged the phone. He would never know. He'd just assumed the laptop's message app was buggy and hadn't synced properly in a while. He never used it anyway. I wasn't done. His phone was a gateway, but our shared finances were the map. I went into the joint account portal. I went back, not just weeks, but months. I was looking for a specific date. Last Valentine's Day. He had, of course, been at a mandatory leadership training in St. Louis. He'd told me his boss, a man I'd never met, had booked the whole senior team. He'd even sounded annoyed about it. Who does training on Valentine's Day, right? These guys are animals. I found the expense report he'd filed. He'd been sloppy, using the joint Amex instead of his corporate card for the hotel, claiming he'd get reimbursed. Hotel the Four Seasons, St. Louis, charge $842, date February 14th. I clicked the folio, the detailed receipt from the hotel loaded as a PDF. It wasn't a charge for a conference room. It wasn't a standard king room for a single traveler. It was the romance package, room service, charged at 9:07 p.m., 1 bottle, Veuve Clicquot, 2 crystal flutes, 1 order, chocolate-covered strawberries. I took a screenshot. I opened my digital annotation tool. I circled the items. I circled the date. I circled the room rate, which was double the standard. I saved the file. Receipt 02, Valentine's St. Louis. PNG. The evidence was piling up. I was methodical. I needed to prove not just the affair, but the nature of the man I was dealing with. I needed to prove the arrogance. I opened a new browser tab. I went to LinkedIn. I typed in her name, Tessa Cole. Her profile popped up immediately. Professional headshot, bright smile. Strategy lead at Vectorize Solutions. Below that senior analyst, below that intern, all at the same company. She was a lifer. She was ambitious. And she was, unequivocally, his subordinate. I scrolled down. Her work history was there, her college, her skills. Nowhere did it say Lucas's long-lost cousin from Poughkeepsie. I took a screenshot of her entire public profile. I did this to counter the inevitable, desperate lie he would try. She's my cousin. She's my sister's friend. No, she was his coworker. It was a clear abuse of power. It was a clear violation. I saved the file. Tessa see LinkedIn proof of employment, PNG. I sent all of it to the secret email. Then I cleared my browser history, my cache, my cookies. I logged out of the bank. I closed the laptop. I sat back in the study. The house was silent again. I had the digital proof, but digital proof could be argued, deleted, or dismissed as fake. I needed a physical analog record of the pattern. The next day, I went to a stationery store. I didn't buy a journal. A journal is emotional. A journal can be used to paint you as unstable. I bought a planner, a simple, leather-bound, 18-month planner, the kind I would use for my content strategy at VarioQuest. When I got home, I opened it to the current month. I went to the kitchen, took a pen from the drawer, and sat at the island. I went back in my memory. I went back in my text file logs. I made a key on the first page. X equals Lucas home after midnight. This was suspicious. Unexplained financial activity cash withdrawal. Odd purchase. Equals verbal disparagement or public humiliation. G. Doesn't know how to install a modem. I started filling in the boxes. September 18th, X. October 2nd, X. October 5th. October 10th, X. October 12th. The modem comment at his parents' house. The grid for the last 2 months began to fill up. It was an abstract, a data visualization of my marriage's collapse. It was no longer a feeling. It was a fact. It was a pattern. Lucas came home 2 hours later, sweaty and triumphant from the gym. He saw me at the island, the planner open, a pen in my hand. "That's my girl," he said, grabbing a water from the fridge. "Always working. What is that? The content calendar for next quarter?" I looked up at him and smiled. "Something like that. Just getting organized." He nodded, satisfied. His wife was predictable. His wife was emotional. His wife was busy with her little job. I watched him walk upstairs. I looked back down at the planner. The page was a constellation of his failures. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning an escape. And if the opportunity arose, I'd turn it into a stage. I had been playing the part of the perfect, supportive, slightly dim wife for weeks. Lucas had relaxed completely. He was so consumed by his own brilliance juggling his killer job, his smart mistress, and his emotional wife that his arrogance became a glaring vulnerability. It was a Tuesday night in early December. A cold rain was lashing against the windows of our Riverton house. Lucas was sprawled on the living room sofa, still in his work trousers and a wrinkled dress shirt, passed out cold. A football game he'd been half watching droned on the television, and an empty bourbon glass was tipped over on the carpet next to him. I was cleaning the kitchen, the scent of lemon polish sharp in the air. I walked into the living room to grab his glass and saw it. His phone, it was on the sofa cushion, right next to his hip. Face up, unlocked. He'd been texting before the bourbon knocked him out. I stood over him. His breathing was a low, rattling snore. The blue light of the TV washed over his face. I didn't move for a full minute. I just watched him. Then, I looked at the phone. A new message notification was at the top of the screen. From Tessa C. My hand didn't shake as I reached down, my fingers brushing the warm fabric of the cushion, and lifted the phone. The message read, "So, Christmas divorce prank still on. Derek wants front row." I read it once, then a second time. Divorce prank. My blood didn't run cold. It didn't boil. It just stopped. Everything in me went perfectly, terrifyingly still. They weren't just planning to leave. They were planning a show, a humiliation. I took my own phone from my pocket. I photographed the screen. The image, with Tessa's laughing emoji, was instantly saved. I sent it to my encrypted email. Then, with a steady thumb, I swiped Tessa's message away. I deleted it from his lock screen notifications. I didn't want him waking up and seeing what I'd seen. My eyes scanned down. The message thread with Derek Shaw was right below it. I tapped it open. Lucas, in his bourbon-fueled confidence, had been texting his best friend just before he passed out. Lucas Scottsdale was a win. Tessa is a fucking rock star. Derek attaboy. So we on for the big show. Lucas, absolutely. I'll serve her at my parents' house on Christmas Eve. Classic. Right in front of my mom. Derek Savage. She'll cry. Lucas, 100%. Women are predictable. I stared at the words. I'll serve her at my parents. She'll cry. Derek wants front row. It wasn't just a plan to divorce me. It was a script, a performance piece for an audience of two, designed for maximum emotional damage. They were going to turn my humiliation into a holiday spectator sport. They'd probably film it. I felt a sudden, sharp clarity. My role in their play was the weeping wife. I photographed that screen, too. Sent it, deleted it from his phone. I gently placed the phone back on the cushion, exactly as I had found it. I picked up his empty bourbon glass and went back to the kitchen. My defensive posture, my parachute building, was over. You don't build a parachute when the other person is actively sawing the wings off the plane. You find a new plane. I was in Maya's office by 9 a.m. the next morning. The rain had turned to sleet. I didn't bring coffee. I brought my laptop. I sat down, opened it, and connected to her guest Wi-Fi. I opened my encrypted email. I didn't speak. I just turned the laptop around. I showed her the divorce prank text. I showed her the women are predictable text. Then I showed her the hotel folio from St. Louis, the LinkedIn profile of Tessa Cole, the dozens of TXT files detailing his late nights and cash withdrawals. And finally, I showed her the scanned copy of the flimsy, 2-page agreement he had signed a year ago. Maya read everything in silence. Her face was a mask of professional concentration. She read for 10 solid minutes. When she was done, she leaned back in her chair. She didn't look angry. She didn't look sympathetic. She smiled. "A Christmas divorce prank," she said, her voice dripping with disbelief and admiration for their sheer, idiotic cruelty. "These men are a caricature." He's going to serve me at his parents' house on Christmas Eve, I said, my voice flat. Derek wants a front row seat. Oh, he'll get a front row seat, Maya said, her smile widening. But the show is going to be completely different. She spun back to her computer. This changes the timeline. We are no longer waiting for him to make a move. You are filing first. Today, she said, we get this stamped before December 23rd. We are going to take his little prank, and we are going to use it to strip him of every piece of leverage he thinks he has. He wants to serve you fine. He's going to be serving himself. She began to type, her fingers flying. That first document he signed, the joke, that's our anchor. It proves his willingness to sign financial documents without duress. Now, we attach it to a petition for dissolution that cites infidelity, which we can prove. Thank you. St. Louis. And misappropriation of marital funds, that's the cash withdrawals, the hotel, the new cologne. She stopped and looked at me. Under Illinois law, this isn't just a 50-50 split anymore. Avery, his affair, especially with a subordinate, and his documented use of marital money to fund it, plus this original signed agreement. It all paints a picture of a man who is reckless, arrogant, and a financial liability to the marriage. We will argue that the primary assets, including the full equity in the Riverton house, remain with you as a matter of spousal support and restitution until a final judgment. He won't see it coming. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was at Maya's office, signing papers, reviewing drafts. By night, I was the perfect, oblivious wife, preparing for the holidays. I bought Lucas a Christmas gift, a beautiful, obscenely expensive cashmere sweater. I wrapped it in gold paper. I asked him about work. How's Tessa doing? Is she still being a killer on that new project? Yeah, babe, she's great, he said, not even looking up from his laptop. He was so deep in his own story. He couldn't see mine. He just saw the wife who was finally getting it. He even had the audacity to say it. We were decorating the tree. I was stringing lights. He was drinking an old-fashioned. You know, Aves, he said, swirling the ice in his glass. I know I've been distracted. It's stress at Vector Rise. It's been hell. But I'm lucky to have you at home. You're steady. Stress at work, the theme song of his betrayal. I'm always here, Lucas, I said, smoothing a strand of tinsel, and then, a week before Christmas, the stakes changed. It wasn't a plan. It was just biology. I'd been feeling off, not just stressed off, but physically wrong. My coffee tasted like tin, the smell of the ossobuco I'd made for him last month, the one he loved, now made me want to gag. I blamed it on the anxiety, but I was never late, and I was. I realized, 10 days late. I bought a test from the pharmacy on my way home from work. I took it in the downstairs guest bathroom while Lucas was on a team call upstairs, his voice booming through the floorboards. I set the white plastic stick on the marble countertop. I waited 2 minutes. I looked down. It wasn't ambiguous. It was a sharp, clear, undeniable plus sign. I was pregnant. 8 weeks. By my calculation. I sat down on the tiled floor. This was not in the plan. This was not in Maya's strategy. This was a complication. A messy, emotional, human complication. I thought about his voice, floating down from the office. I'll serve her. She'll cry. Women are predictable. He would use this. He would use this baby as a weapon. He would use it to paint me as a liar, to trap me, to pivot from callous husband to concerned father-to-be. He would use it to control the narrative. I stood up. I looked at the plus sign. I took a deep breath. I wrapped the test in tissue, buried it deep in the bathroom trash. I went to the kitchen and splashed cold water on my face. He would not use this, because he would not know, not yet. I went back to wrapping presents. The secret wasn't a complication. It was a shield. It was the one part of this they couldn't possibly predict. The Grayson family home in Mapleford was a stereotype of suburban Christmas success. Every window was framed in tasteful white lights. A massive, perfectly coiffed wreath hung on the front door, and the air inside smelled of roasting turkey, pine, and expensive plug-in cinnamon. His parents saw Lucas as their crowning achievement, the smart, successful son who had escaped Ohio and landed a sweet wife who was good for him. They adored me, which is to say, they adored the quiet, supportive role I played. I had arrived early. To help, just as I always did. "Avery, dear, you didn't have to," his mother said, pulling me into a soft, cashmere-scented hug. "I wouldn't miss it, Mrs. Grayson," I said, handing her a box of expensive chocolates. "The table looks beautiful." I was polite. I was respectful. I was everything she believed me to be. My sister, Riley, flew in from Denver that morning. Lucas thought it was just a happy coincidence that our holiday schedules aligned. I had paid for her ticket. I had sent her a password-protected link to a folder containing every screenshot, every TXT file, every receipt. The email I sent her was simple. If something happens to me, or if I go dark, this is why, back me up. She walked in, saw me arranging napkins, and gave me a long hug. "It's so good to see you, Aves," she whispered, her voice bright for the room, but her grip on my arms was iron. "I'm here," the grip said. "Do it." And then the guests of honor arrived. Derek Shaw swaggered in, holding a bottle of aged whiskey for Lucas's father and a smirk for Lucas. He looked like a man who had bought a ticket to a comedy roast. And then Lucas, my husband, he was glowing with confidence. He had, as I'd predicted, chosen to wear the gaudy reindeer sweater I'd bought him last year as a joke. He'd repurposed it as a symbol of his folksy family man credentials. He kissed his mother, clapped his father on the back, and slung an arm around my waist, pulling me in for a kiss. "This is it, babe," he murmured, his voice full of holiday cheer, his eyes full of something else. "The perfect Christmas. It's lovely." "Lucas," I said, smiling up at him, in the pocket of my wool coat, hanging in the hall closet, was a stiff, burgundy leather envelope. It was of the quality one might use for important legal documents, or perhaps a very expensive invitation. Inside it was not a proposal. It was a copy of my petition for dissolution, already filed, already stamped by the county clerk on December 21st. Maya's part of the plan was timed to the minute. At exactly 7:15 p.m., an email was scheduled to hit Lucas's inbox from her server. It was a simple, legal notification, reconfirmation of service, executed marital agreement. Lucas Grayson, Avery Bennett. It was now 6:30. The performance was in full swing. We sat at the long dining table. The candlelight was flattering. The china gleamed. Outside, a few of the neighborhood children ran by, their shouts muffled by the double-paned glass. They were just background noise, a pleasant, blurred image of family life that made the scene feel even more grotesquely perfect. Lucas's father proposed a toast. "To family," he said, raising his glass. "And to our son, Lucas, for everything he's achieved." "To Lucas," Derek echoed, too loudly. Lucas soaked it in. He turned to me and raised his glass. "And to my beautiful, supportive wife, Avery." I smiled. I raised my glass. I drank. I looked around the table. Mrs. Grayson, asking Riley about the skiing in Denver. Mr. Grayson, pontificating about his retirement plan. Derek, shoveling food into his mouth, his eyes darting between me and Lucas every few seconds. He was waiting for the show to start. He was checking his front row seat. I knew they were waiting until after the main course. It was the classic move. Build the tension, get everyone relaxed, and then drop the bomb just before dessert, when everyone is trapped at the table. I stood up, collecting plates. "I'll help clear," I said. As I walked toward the kitchen, Lucas and Derek stood up, grabbing their empty glasses. "We'll handle the wine," Lucas announced, heading for the sideboard in the adjoining sitting room. I paused in the shadows of the dining room archway, holding a stack of china. They didn't see me. They were in the kitchen, just by the doorway, out of sight of the table. Lucas was grabbing a corkscrew. "Is your phone set?" Lucas whispered, his voice a low, excited rasp. Derek patted his pocket. "Ready to film. Bro, just give the signal." "After the main plates are cleared," Lucas said, "I'll stand up to make a toast. It's going to be epic." Her face. "Classic," Derek breathed, like a true connoisseur of cruelty. I didn't drop the plates. I didn't stop breathing. I just stood there for 1, 2, 3 seconds. Then I turned and walked into the kitchen from the other direction. "Oh, good," I said, my voice as bright and clear as a bell. "You guys are getting more wine. I think we'll need another bottle of red." They both jumped, startled. Lucas recovered first. "Yeah, babe, just grabbing the good stuff." I smiled, placed the plates by the sink, and picked up the fresh bottle of Cabernet they'd opened. I walked back to the table, my heels clicking on the hardwood. I sat down. I looked at the candle flame in the center of the table. I looked at the empty seat where Lucas would soon sit. I took a slow, deep breath. The sick, nervous woman from Columbus was gone. The wife who flinched at his jokes was gone. In her place was a woman who had just heard her husband plan to film her humiliation. "All right, you want a show? I'll give you a show." The turkey had been cleared. The good china sat in front of everyone, smeared with the remnants of the meal. Mrs. Grayson was just starting to ask about dessert. She had a pecan pie and an apple crumble when Lucas pushed his chair back. He stood. He tapped his wine glass with a butter knife. The small, tinny ping cut through the low-level chatter. Everyone turned to look at him. His father looked mildly annoyed at the interruption. His mother looked expectant. Derek Shaw leaned forward, his elbows on the table, a glint in his eye. I saw his hand move to his jacket pocket, where his phone was. He was getting the camera ready. "Before we have dessert," Lucas began, his voice smooth and full, the voice he used for a keynote. "I actually have a special gift for Avery, one I wanted to share with the whole family." "Oh, Lucas, how wonderful," his mother cooed. She thought it was a cruise, a new car, a piece of jewelry. Lucas smiled at her, then at me. His eyes were bright. This was his moment. This was the opening scene of his masterpiece. He reached into his own jacket, the pocket of the ridiculous reindeer sweater, and pulled out a plain, white, standard business envelope, no ribbon, no card. He walked around the table and placed it on the polished wood in front of my plate. "For me," I said, my voice pitched with just the right amount of light confusion. "For you, babe," he said. "Go on, open it." I looked at him. I looked at Derek, who was failing to hide a smirk behind his wine glass. I looked at Riley, who had tensed beside me, her knuckles white on her napkin. I looked at Mrs. Grayson, who was beaming. My hands were perfectly steady. I picked up the envelope. It was thin. I slid my fingernail under the flap and tore it open. Inside, I pulled out 3 stapled pages. I didn't have to read the whole thing. The header was all I needed. In the Circuit Court of Mapleford County, Illinois. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Grayson v. Grayson. He had his own lawyer. He had prepared his own petition. He was confident, so confident, that I would be the emotional wreck who hadn't seen it coming, who had no plan. He was serving me. Here, now. I read the first line. I let my eyes scan the page. I let the silence in the room stretch out, become thick and heavy. Everyone was watching me. This was the moment Derek's camera was waiting for, the moment I was supposed to crumble. I slowly lifted my head. I looked right at Lucas, and I smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was a small, gentle, infinitely tired smile. "Thank you, Lucas," I said. My voice was clear. The room's occupants, who had all been holding their breath, let it out in a confused whoosh. Derek's smirk faltered. Lucas's triumphant expression didn't just fade. It collapsed. He said. "Thank you," I repeated. I reached for my purse. which I'd set on the floor beside my chair. I clicked it open and pulled out a single item, a sleek, black, ballpoint pen. I unsnapped the cap. I placed the papers back on the table. I found the signature line on the final page, the one marked respondent. I signed my name, Avery Bennett Grayson. A neat, clean signature. I did it without hesitation. I did not ask for time. I did not ask for a lawyer. I did not cry. The only sound in the room was the scritch of the pen on the cheap paper. I capped the pen. I pushed the newly signed, 3-page document back across the table toward my husband. The entire table was frozen. Stone, Mrs. Grayson's mouth was open. Mr. Grayson's glass was halfway to his lips. Riley was looking at me, and I saw a flicker of pure, unadulterated pride in her eyes. Lucas just stared at the signed papers. He was pale. You signed it?" he stammered. You signed it?" He was completely off script. His leading lady had just walked on stage, delivered the final monologue, and walked off, leaving him alone in the first act. "Of course," I said, zipping my purse shut. "When something is over, it's over. Why draw it out?" I folded my hands on the table. "But it's so funny you did this." I turned to the rest of the table. "Lucas and we have the same wavelength. I actually got him a gift, too." I reached down beside my chair again. This time, I pulled up a box. It was beautifully wrapped in thick, gold leaf paper with a perfectly tied, cream-colored satin bow. It was heavy. It was significant. I slid it across the table. It came to a stop right in front of him. He stared at it as if it were a bomb. "What is that?" he whispered. "Your gift," I said. "Go on, open it. In front of the whole family." He looked at me. He looked at Derek. Derek looked baffled. This wasn't in the script. Slowly, his hands shaking with a mixture of confusion and, for the first time, a dawning, terrible fear. He pulled at the ribbon. It fell away. He tore the gold paper. It was a simple, elegant, black document box. He lifted the lid. Inside, there was no cashmere sweater. There was just paper, a thick stack of it. He lifted out the top document. It was bound in a burgundy leather cover, the one from my coat pocket. He opened it. His face, which had been pale, went a blotchy, mottled white. Derek, impatient, got up and stood behind him, peering over his shoulder. "What the fuck is that?" Derek hissed. Lucas didn't answer. He was reading. He was reading the supplemental agreement Maya had drafted. He was reading the clause about the proportional division of assets. He was reading the clause that cited misappropriation of marital funds. He was reading the clause that granted me, pending final judgment, sole and exclusive use of the Riverton residence. And at the very bottom, stapled to the back, was a copy of the flimsy 2-page agreement he had signed a year ago. Drunk and arrogant. The new agreement, the one in his hands, had a clause that explicitly reaffirmed that first signature as a knowing and voluntary act. His signature wasn't on this new document. Mine was, and so was the stamp from the county clerk, filed, executed, dated December 21st. What? What is this? "Avery," he finally managed to say, his voice a strangled rasp. His mother, her face a mask of confusion, stood up. "Lucas, what is it? What did she give you?" She came over, pulled the document from his unresisting hand, and put on her reading glasses. Derek backed away from the table, his face ashen. "Oh, shit, man," he whispered. Mrs. Grayson read. Her eyes, magnified by the lenses, scanned the page. I watched her face turn from confusion to disbelief to a cold, hard anger. I looked back at Lucas. He was defeated. He didn't even have the energy to be angry. He was just hollow. I leaned forward, my voice soft, but loud enough for the entire, silent table to hear. "You said women were predictable, Lucas," I said. "You said I'd cry. You said I was all emotion." I paused. I let the words hang in the air, in the space between the turkey platter and the dessert forks. I just predicted you'd use the holiday, I said, my voice calm and steady. So I used it first. Just as the words, "I used it first," settled over the room, a new sound cut the silence. It wasn't a gasp. It wasn't a word. It was the sharp, intrusive buzz of a phone vibrating on a hard surface. It was Lucas's phone, sitting on the table next to his father's abandoned bread plate. The time was 7:15 p.m., right on schedule. Lucas, who looked like he'd been struck, reflexively glanced down at the screen. It lit up, illuminating his face. It was an email notification, even from across the table. I could see the sender, Maya Ortiz. Esca. The subject line was clear, professional, and devastating: reconfirmation. Executed marital agreement. Lucas Grayson, Avery Bennett. He didn't need to open it. He just stared at the word. Executed. In his world, in the world of contracts and strategy. Executed meant the deal was done. It meant his own petition. The one I had just signed with a smile was now irrelevant. It was a counteroffer that had arrived after the original deal was already signed, sealed, and filed with the court. His power play, his classic move, was now just a worthless piece of paper. He had brought a knife to a gunfight I had already won. He looked up from the phone, his eyes no longer just pale, but hollowed out. He was finally truly seeing me. His mother, still holding my document, was shaking. "Lucas, what is this misappropriation of funds infidelity?" Lucas didn't answer her. He was looking at me. "You?" he started, his voice a low growl. I decided it was time to answer the question he hadn't asked. I kept my voice calm, conversational, as if discussing the weather, but I made sure it carried to his parents, to his best friend. "You told Tessa you were going to serve me tonight, Lucas," I said, my voice cutting through his mother's frantic whispers. "In front of your parents, you said you wanted to see me cry." Derek Shaw, who had been slinking toward the door, froze. "I have the audio file of you and Derek planning it," I continued, looking right at Derek, then back at my husband. "I have the recording of him saying he wanted a front row seat. I have the text where you called it a divorce prank. I didn't need to play it. The certainty in my voice was enough. They knew I had it. Lucas finally found his. "You were spying on me," he hissed, the words dripping with venom. "You recorded me. You were tracking me." "No, Lucas," I said, and I leaned forward slightly. I wanted him to hear the distinction. "I wasn't in your bushes. I didn't tap your phone. I just backed up what you left wide open. Your phone on the sofa, your laptop in the study, your joint bank account. You were so busy predicting my emotions. You didn't bother to protect your data." I reached into my purse one last time. I pulled out a third envelope. This one was small, light, and flimsy. It was a simple white envelope from a doctor's office. This was the last piece. Not a legal blow, but a personal one, the one that would take away his last move. I slid it onto the table. It landed near his wine glass. He stared at it. "What's this?" he whispered. "More evidence." "No," I said. "This one was supposed to be a real gift." He just looked at it. His mother, however, was now laser-focused on it. "Open it, Lucas," I said. His hand was shaking so badly he couldn't pick it up. He just fumbled with the flap. I waited. He pulled out a small, rectangular piece of glossy thermal paper. He looked at it. He didn't understand. It was just a black and white blur to him. "Mrs. Grayson," however, let out a sound, a strangled gasp that was half joy, half horror. "Oh, God," she breathed. She didn't need to read the text at the top. She knew what it was. Patient Avery Grayson. Jest. Age 8 weeks, 0 days. It was a picture of my 8-week ultrasound. The entire room seemed to suck in its breath. Mr. Grayson dropped his fork. Riley, who I hadn't told, put her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide. Lucas finally focused on the image, and then on my face. The color drained from his skin, leaving a sick, gray pallor. I was going to tell everyone tonight, I said, my voice quiet. I was going to announce it after the toast, as a surprise, before I knew what your surprise was. I looked at him, at his hollowed-out expression. But since you and Derek were so excited to turn me into your Christmas entertainment, I decided to put it in the gift pile with everything else. This was the part he hadn't seen coming. This was the part Maya hadn't even planned for, and I watched him get it. I watched his strategy mind click, a second too late. He wasn't just losing his wife. He wasn't just losing the house. He was the man who was trying to kick his pregnant wife out of her home on Christmas Eve, a fact that was now known to his mother, his father, and the man who was supposed to be his best friend. He understood, in that instant, that the clause in the document his mother was holding, the one that gave me sole and exclusive use of the Riverton residence, was no longer just a legal request. It was an ironclad, unassailable, moral certainty. No judge on earth would look at this set of facts, at this ultrasound, at this man, and rule in his favor. He was done. I stood up. My chair made a soft scraping sound on the hardwood floor. I looked at Lucas. He was a shell. I looked at Derek. He couldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Mrs. Grayson. She was weeping, clutching a legal document in one hand and staring at the picture of her first grandchild in the other. I placed my napkin on the table. The next time you want to blame stress at work, Lucas, I said, my voice final, make sure it doesn't come with hotel receipts from St. Louis. Make sure it doesn't come with text threads planning an offsite. And make sure it doesn't come with a recording of your best friend laughing about it. I looked at Derek. No one is laughing now. The room was silent, utterly, completely silent. Lucas had no allies left. He had nothing to leverage. He was cornered, and he had built the cage himself. Lucas finally lunged, not with his body, but with his voice. It was the last, desperate scramble of a man who had lost his footing. "She planned it," he yelled. His voice was high, cracking. He wasn't looking at me. He was pleading with his parents, with the room. "The whole thing, it's a setup. She's been planning this. She's manipulative." I stopped, my hand on the back of my chair, and turned. The entire room was a photograph, frozen in that moment of accusation. Derek, by the door, looked like he was about to be sick. Mr. Grayson was staring at his plate. Mrs. Grayson was weeping. A silent, awful shaking. I looked at my husband. "You're right, Lucas," I said. My voice, calm and measured, cut through his panic. He stopped, his mouth slightly open. "I did plan," I said. "That's the part you never understood. You were so sure I would react. You expected me to be emotional. You expected tears. You expected screaming. You expected me to be the predictable woman you always talked about." I took a step toward the table. "You didn't expect me to be the prepared one." I glanced at Derek. He was trapped. He couldn't leave, that would be admitting guilt. He couldn't stay, the humiliation he had come to watch was now his own. He was the co-conspirator to a plot that had just been revealed as both cruel and stupid. The shame was radiating off him in waves. He wouldn't look at Lucas. He couldn't. And then I looked at Mrs. Grayson. She had stopped crying. She was just looking at her son, her face a mask of cold. Dawning realization. She had heard his modem jokes at Sunday dinners. She had listened to him brag about his killer job and his emotional wife, and now she was holding the physical evidence, the filed agreement, the ultrasound that proved her successful. Brilliant son was, in fact, an arrogant fool. A fool who had been so blinded by his own superiority that he'd not only instigated this, but he'd been outplanned, outplayed, and legally disarmed by the very person he had zero respect for. I walked back to the table. I was done. I walked past Lucas's chair. The petition he had served me, the one I had so calmly signed, was still sitting there, a monument to his failure. I left it. I walked to his mother. I gently, very gently, took the burgundy leather-bound document, my executed petition, from her trembling hand. "I'll take that, Mrs. Grayson," I said softly. She released it. I walked to the end of the table and picked up the small, white envelope, tucking the ultrasound picture safely back inside. My documents, my proof, my future. I had everything I needed. I stood at the head of the table, looking at the ruins, the congealed food, the half-empty wine glasses, the stunned, broken faces. "Well," I said, my voice returning to the light, pleasant tone of a daughter-in-law at a holiday gathering. "This has all been very heavy." I looked at Mrs. Grayson, who was staring into the middle distance. "The desserts. You said there was pecan pie and apple crumble." No one moved. No one spoke. The question was so absurdly normal, so breathtakingly mundane, that it was a violence all its own. They were in the middle of a war, and I was asking about a la mode. "I still want everyone to have dessert," I said pleasantly to the silent room. The silence was my answer. "No, all right," I said with a small shrug. I turned and walked into the kitchen. I heard a single, sharp sob behind me. It was Mrs. Grayson. In the kitchen, the lights were bright and clean. I opened the refrigerator. I found the apple crumble in its glass dish. I found the vanilla bean ice cream in the freezer. I spooned a large portion of the crumble into a clean bowl, added a generous scoop of ice cream, and picked up a clean spoon. I walked back into the dining room. They were all exactly as I had left them. Lucas hadn't moved. He was just empty. He was staring at the chair I had just left. He finally understood his grand plan, his Christmas divorce prank that he was going to film. The one designed to humiliate me in front of the only people in the world whose opinions he truly feared, had turned on him. He hadn't just lost his house. He hadn't just lost his marriage. He had lost his audience. He had been revealed, in front of his mother, his father, and his best friend, as the fool. I walked past him. I sat down in my original chair, right next to my sister, Riley, who had been watching this all unfold with a kind of terrified, white-knuckled awe. Slowly turned her head. She looked at me. She looked at the bowl of pie and ice cream. She looked back at me. Then, under the table, out of sight, she reached over and squeezed my hand, a hard, painful, perfect squeeze that said, "Everything. It's over. You did it." I picked up my spoon. I took a bite of the apple crumble. The cinnamon was warm. The apples were sweet. The ice cream was cold. It was, without question, the most delicious thing I had ever tasted in my life. I wasn't thinking about the long, ugly months ahead. I wasn't thinking about lawyers, or Tessa C., or Derek Shaw. I wasn't even thinking about the 8-week-old secret I was carrying. I was just thinking that for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't small. I wasn't shrinking. I was no longer being controlled by their narrative. I was just a woman, eating her dessert. I took another bite. I looked up, across the wasteland of the table, at the man I had married, the man who had called me predictable. He was still watching me, his eyes dead, waiting. Waiting for what? For me to scream, to cry, to finally give him the reaction he craved. I swallowed. I set the spoon down in the bowl. I smiled. A small, real, cinnamon-sweet smile. "You know, Lucas," I said, my voice just a quiet conversation between the two of us. "When I caught you texting your coworker, and you told me it was just stress at work, I believed you." He flinched. The words, the original sin. "I believed you," I finished. "Long enough to rewrite the rules." The story ends there. It ends with me, Avery Bennett, sitting straight-backed at a ruined Christmas Eve dinner. It ends with my documents, my proof, and my future sitting in a neat pile beside my plate. It ends with the men who laughed at me, who planned to film my pain, sitting in stunned, humiliated silence. They thought I would cry. They thought I would be quiet. They didn't realize they had handed me the knife, handle first, long ago. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. So please drop your city or country in the comments below. Let's connect, share our thoughts, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories. Make sure to like this video And if you really want to support this channel, smash that hype button to help more people hear this story.